If you hear a slight humming noise, it's my ceiling fan. I should have turned it off before making this video. Oh well. This guy I know pretty well I stay in contact with that is, I think, buddies with a Nikon Ambassador. Um, just because someone is a pro shooter for Nikon doesn't mean that they know all that much other than their craft. And that was always true in photography school, too. A lot of the people that have actually come by some of the best shooters in the world back in the day, they had a few lenses and a camera, and, they worked it. What they had, they worked. But, I mean, they didn't delve into, gear sniffing and crap like that. But a lot of times someone could say, well, this person's an ambassador. They know a lot. But they told a buddy of mine that it is always the case that a full-frame camera is superior to a crop sensor camera. And that's absolutely not the case. If you're a wildlife sports action shooter, and say you have a $12,000 600mm f4 Nikkor, that lens is best mounted on what? It's best mounted on a DX camera. Now, it is the case, obviously so, that a DX image needs to be blown up more to make an 8x10, 20x30 than does an FX image. It is also the case that there's more translational information, like, wildlife sports action shooters, 99% of the time they got to crop the image. That means as far as the details of a feather or of an action runner, so on and so forth, there's more information per square millimeter of that person on the sensor on a DX camera than there is on an FX camera. Let's take the Nikon D810, for example, 36 megapixel camera. Take the Nikon D500, for example, 20 megapixel camera. Now multiply 20 times 2.25. Right. Let's take the Nikon D7100, for example. If it were scaled up at the same pixel density, it would be a 54 megapixel sensor. In other words, if we kept the density exactly the same and just made it a larger sensor, it would be a 54 megapixel sensor. Now, fact number one, as I've mentioned 100 times before, every lens craps the same light out the end of its rear element. The image projection is exactly the same. A crop is a crop, and only a crop. Nothing changes there either. Luminal density remains a constant. Right? Exposure is per unit area, not per total area. Larger sensors don't gather more light. They gather a wider field of view. So the Nikon Ambassador, which I will not name, is wrong in this instance, but it is easily, it is extremely easily conceived that someone would be lured by such information from someone who is... There's only 13 Nikon Ambassadors. They're not Nikon Ambassadors because they know all the, spec sheet detailed information on Nikon stuff. They go out there and they hit it. And they're good at that. Some better than others. So that information is palpably incorrect. And that's not my opinion or not my feeling. That's just a frickin' hardcore, irrefutable fact. Sports action, wildlife, all things being... I mean, you see the National Geographic photographers out there? Why do you think they're packing a $12,000 lens on a cheap, relatively cheap, DX camera? Because 100 times out of 100, they're cropping the little birdie, the yellow-breasted, speckled upper woodland woodpecker. Is taking up about that much on the sensor. You take the exact same 600mm f4 on a D500, and the exact same 600mm f4 on a D5, for example, which are both 20 megapixel sensors. All right. The image projection on both sensors of that little birdie, the yellow-breasted speckled woodpecker, is going to be exactly the same. However, there's more detailed information captured from that image projection, from that exact same lens on the Nikon D500 than there is on the D5. This is just one example. Not to mention the fact that the Nikon D500 doesn't have an anti-aliasing filter, which means it's a little bit sharper by default. Also, even before it hits the sensor, optical low-pass filter. So, in this case, the Nikon Ambassador is wrong. Um, DX sensor cameras are undesirable. I use that word lightly. Undesirable. Obviously so. For portraiture and wide angle. Everybody's always bitching about a wide angle lens for a DX cancer, and I go, yeah, that's the reason why you buy an FX camera. Yeah. Portraiture. You know, compression, if you frame your subject, 58 millimeters is still a 58 millimeter, even though the field of view is basically 85 millimeter. It still has the compression of a 58 millimeter, or 56, same thing. Yeah. This is the reason why you buy an FX camera. If someone says, all I do is landscape and portraiture, like, FX camera. So it says all I do is sports, action, and street photography. Screw it. Why the hell would you buy a full-frame camera? Why? However, the D500 is not cheap. $2,000. I mean, $2,000 to get you a freaking gray market D810. However, for some fast-moving street stuff, I'd rather have the D500 in my damn hands than the Nikon D810, which ain't so fast because I have that camera also. So, yeah, just because the Nikon Ambassador said it doesn't mean it is accurate. And that's not my opinion, once again. It's just a damn hardcore fact. F-A-C-T, fact. Welcome to sunny Fort Myers, Florida, where I even got sunburned on the drive down through the windshield. Yeah. Because I haven't been outside today. Not much, anyway. Very, very, very little. Anyway, so that's a bit of information. Nikon Ambassador, you're wrong. Wrong.